And welcome to another edition of the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network with Pierre, McGuire, and myself.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche. And after 22 years, Raymond Mark!
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Hey, Jimmy Murphy, Pierre McGuire back here on the Eye Test. Another Wednesday live edition where we're going to take some questions from our listeners and viewers here in a bit. And Pierre, I want to just a couple quick NHL topics because I really want to go heavy on the World Juniors in this episode. And I know our fans are excited about that as well because that tournament's about to get going next week. But I want to just go to the Ottawa Senators last night, Pierre. They go into Arizona. They take a 3-0 lead, but they lose 4-3. And, I don't have the stats in front of me. I'd love to somehow find it. I didn't have the time to do it this morning, but how many teams lose their first game under a new coach? We hardly ever see it. We've seen St. Louis get the bump. We've seen other teams go on a run there, Minnesota, what have you. But it's rare that happens, and especially to happen in a fashion where you blow a 3-0 lead. If you're Steve Staios right now, Pierre, what are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be patient if I'm Steve Staios. That's number one. Number two, the other team that got a huge bump coming out of a coaching change were Edmonton Oilers, Jimmy.
Right.
When you think about it, when Chris Knobloch went in and replaced Coach Woodcroft, it made a big difference in Edmonton, and that's not a knock on the previous staff. It's just a reality. I think also adding Paul Coffey behind the bench in Edmonton has really helped Evan Bouchard. It's really helped Darnell Nurse. It's made their team better. But you're spot on. It's usually a real good first, second, and third period bump when you make a coaching change. And if you look at Ottawa last night, significant first period bump. They had a 3-0 lead in a really difficult building to play in, and they couldn't sustain it. So I think it speaks to a few things. One, Arizona woke up after the first period. Two, there's still some major issues internally on the defensive side of the game for the Ottawa Senators. They have to adjust to that, and I think Jacques Martin will do that. But the third thing is you have to have a complete buy-in by the offensive forwards of the Ottawa Senators in terms of what Jacques Martin is going to present and wants done. And they've got a lot of guys who are really familiar manufacturing offense, Jimmy. They don't have a lot of guys that are real familiar when it comes to playing a 200-foot game, talking about the forwards coming back and helping the defense. This is something that Daniel Alfredsson, I think, can help them with, and Jacques Martin can help with long-term down the road.
I'm with you, and I think they can. But the one thing I found interesting was the interaction between Daniel Alfredsson and some players on the bench, Pierre. I don't know if you caught it. The guys on the broadcast mentioned it a bit. He was really giving it to them. And maybe that's something they weren't used to under the previous regime. And that's not a knock to them. It's just the way things were done. And it seemed like Daniel Alfredsson was going out of his way to say, hey, look, I guess Club Med is too strong a word. But I think he was going out of his way to say the atmosphere is changing here, boys. So get used to hearing me yap in your ear if you come back after a bad shift, or if you lollygag it there and you don't go in the corners and pay the price, you're going to hear it from me. So I thought that was very interesting and very telling of what these players can expect going forward.
Daniel's an amazingly intense person, number one, and he takes a lot of pride in the way he carried himself as a professional. And trust me, I was privileged enough to be around him early on in his career. And even though he was a depth draft pick by the late John Ferguson and Randy Sexton, he was a player that really matured quickly. And he was one of the preeminent Swedish players in the National Hockey League. I have total respect for Daniel. Here's the one thing that Daniel's got to be a little bit careful of. He's never coached in the league before. And so it's one thing to want to coach. It's another thing to have coached. Playing and coaching are two totally different things in the National Hockey League. And a lot of people don't understand that. And then all of a sudden, after about 5 or 7 to 10 games, you say, uh-oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it would be. So it takes time to garner that experience. I think eventually he'll get it. Having Jacques there helps a lot, but you're not wrong. I saw the same things you were seeing. And I think there'll just be a feeling out process. Doesn't get any easier for Ottawa, though, Jimmy, before Christmas. When you think about it, they go into Colorado. Colorado's going to be an angry team. They lost last night.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come home and they play on Saturday night with not a lot of rest to play against a Pittsburgh Penguin team that is desperately trying to make themselves relevant in the playoff hunt. So this is not an easy time to be a member of the Ottawa Senators, that's for sure.
For sure. I like what you said there, Pierre, too, because I think that's somehow in the media or amongst fans, people always think that maybe a great player equals a great coach. And I just always point to Wayne Gretzky. I mean, it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest player ever. He wasn't the best coach, though. So it doesn't always translate to that. And it is trying to find that balance. And I think another thing that Alfredsson has, I won't say going against him, but has to adapt to would be the word, is this is a different generation than what he played in. Yeah. And it's a different mentality amongst these players. I mean, I'm seeing it right now, Pierre, in Boston, is what's going on with Jake DeBrusk. He's got 4 goals. He's dependent on to score goals. But look, to his credit, he is doing other stuff that I think he didn't necessarily do when he was scoring the goals. He's paying more attention to defensive details, but maybe it's not translating into the goals that the Bruins need when they're paying him $4 million a year and what he needs to parlay it into a nice contract. But you see the way Jim Montgomery hasn't really come out. He was a little stern last night. He said, look, we need a better shot selection there than the one he took in overtime that turned around and went to, the Kaprizov OT winner. But it's been more positive reinforcement. And that's the theme in today's NHL. So we'll see how Alfredsson adjusts to that.
The list of great players that have gone on to be great coaches is pretty short. You can start with the late Toe Blake, phenomenal coach. He was a great player back in the day. And then you go to Jacques Lemaire, who arguably was probably the best coach, who was a great player in the league, and Larry Robinson. I think in the modern day, Rick Tocchet, who I had the privilege of trading for and coaching and winning a Stanley Cup with, who's doing great things in Vancouver. But the list of great players that have actually coached in the NHL and have been great coaches, it's not a very long list, Jimmy. So your point is extremely well taken and spot on. And that's something, again, people don't pay enough attention to. Being a great player requires unbelievable focus and work habits, and it's not an easy thing to be a great player. It's the same thing to be a great coach, and it's very seldom that you can find a person that can do both things. It's very, 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 very unique.
It's going to be interesting, Pierre. So, and I just want to go back to this Bruins thing with you too right now, Pierre. I want to get your take on this. DeBrusk is getting murdered today on the radio airwaves here, in the media, and amongst the fans on social media. And look, I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you. I know he'd be the first to tell you that he wants to be scoring more. But if you're coaching him right now, and I already mentioned it, that Montgomery's doing a great job with positive reinforcement. But I looked at that play last night when he took that shot and just, it was like that scene in Major League, and the guy goes, just a bit outside. And it was way outside, so when you see this happen, I saw that as pure desperation, as he's pressing too hard. What's your take when you see that happen with a player that can't find the back of the net, and he's doing everything he can, but he just can't break through? What are you telling him behind the scenes?
It's eventually going to come. And a lot of times video is your best friend when you're doing that, especially with this generation of player who are better visual learners than audio learners. So the video coach really matters in this case. Usually you find great plays that Jake has made over time, or maybe Jake has shared with you, one of my favorite players growing up was X, Y, and Z. And then you show him pictures of what X, Y, and Z were doing. So he has a reference point. The one thing I'd say, though, it's a little like Josh Anderson in Montreal, who's now all of a sudden starting to percolate, right, Jimmy? I mean, it's very similar. Yeah. So Josh Anderson's a guy that had a plethora of chances through the first 20 games of the season. Everybody's like, this guy can't score. He can't score. How many goalposts did he hit? How many crossbars did he hit? Mm-hmm. How many times did he get absolutely robbed by goalies? He was manufacturing chances. So I would say about Jake, it's a lot of the same. And I'm not going to make excuses for anybody in Boston, but you and I have talked about this a lot. And I really believe, Jimmy, you've been ahead of the curve on a lot of this. The Bruins are short down the middle. We've talked about it. Yep. Because of retirements to Bergeron, to Krejci. You got some players playing up in the lineup that probably should be playing back in the lineup. And you just let Matthew Poitras go over to play in the World Junior for Canada. So you're now getting shorter at center. So wingers, not always, but usually, wingers, they need centermen to manufacture chances, unless they're power forwards. Jake's not a power forward. Josh Anderson is. so he can manufacture a little bit more on his own. But again, I would just say this. There'll be a plethora of people in the National Hockey League when if Jake DeBrusk becomes a free agent, that will be trying to sign him when free agency starts next year, unless the Bruins re-sign him. But I would tell you that I could see it. 2 teams in Alberta would be at the front of the list trying to sign Jake DeBrusk, whether it's Edmonton or Calgary. I see 2 teams in Alberta that would want to sign him.
And he'd be very happy to go home if it wasn't going to work out here. All right, let's get into the World Juniors right now, Pierre. I'm getting excited. I know you are as well. Yeah. I can't believe we're less than a week away. This year flew. But, hey, here we are. And, look, we're going to stick to North America here because that's where most of our viewers and listeners are. Yep. And, man, when the USA and Canada play, it's going to be one heck of a game. Both teams are stacked. I got to say, if you put a gun to my head right now, who would win a game or who would win a gold medal game between the USA and Canada, I would say USA right now. And I'm not saying that because that's where I'm from. I'm just objectively speaking. I look at that lineup and Pierre, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think this is one of the best rosters they've had in recent memory.
The roster is tremendous. And the fact that they don't have a spot for a Cole Eiserman on the team tells you a lot about where the lineup is. They're fast, they're big, they're skillful, they can finish plays. They've got amazing depth in goal with Fowler and Augustine. Augustine, a draft pick of Detroit, Fowler, a draft pick of Montreal. Both of those guys will eventually be in the NHL not too far down the road. That's amazing depth for a World Junior goaltending position. Their mobility on defense is tremendous for the Americans. The difference will be, I think, how do the younger American players respond to the bright lights of big play? Over the years, the Canadians have really stepped up when the bright light moments really matter. That's true. So I haven't seen that as much from the Americans over time. I think back to Phil Housley's team that won over in Russia. They stepped up and really delivered. I think about Mike Eves' team in 2004. They stepped up and really delivered. I think about Bob Motzko's team in Montreal in 2017. But outside of that, Jimmy, I mean, you're having a hard time finding teams, and to be fair, 2010, Dean Blaze's team winning in the gold medal game against Canada in Canada and Saskatoon. So I'm thinking 4 times over all this time where I've seen the Americans really step up. Whereas for Canada, it's almost year to year to year to year where they find a way to do it. So this will be a big test for the Americans, huge test.
You know what's interesting too, Pierre, is you're saying that too, and I think about it, and I've noticed this a lot. It's always a trend, is that they'll have, usually when it's in North America, you'll get that Canada USA game early. For a while, it was always on New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And USA would usually take that one, but then when they had the rematch later, it would be Canada that would win. And it's almost like Canada understands that you got to pace yourself. I won't say it's a marathon because it's only a 2-week tournament, right? But it's not a sprint, and you got to pace yourself. You have to realize that when you play that team the first time, there's a good chance you're going to play them again. So don't get too high or too low. And I think Canada, through experience, through all the winning they've done, has just done a better job of remaining even-keeled.
The most important thing in this tournament, and I think it was really the program of excellence that Canada created that really helped lead to this. They found a formula where they understood you got to get better every day at the World Junior if you're going to be successful. It doesn't mean you're going to win every game, but every day you got to get better as a group. You have to find more cohesion. You've got to communicate better. You have to have guys really starting to peak at the right time. I go back to the 05 team in Grand Forks, North Dakota. It's probably the best team Canada has ever sent and ever will send. And the only reason why I say that was the winter of the nuclear winter in hockey. There was no NHL. So if you think about it, that year, Getzlaff would have been in the NHL, Carter would have been in the NHL, Richards would have been in the NHL, Weber would have been in the NHL, Dion Phaneuf would have been in the NHL. I'm just using players who were on that team. Brent Burns, Braden Coburn. This was a murderer's row of players. And the reason why they were there is because there was no NHL. So that's why I quantify it. It's the best Canadian team ever sent. And what I remember the most, it wasn't all the games. It wasn't the physical approach they took on Alexander Ovechkin in the gold medal game, knocking him out of the game after the first period physically.
Right.
What I remember the most was a practice early on before the tournament even started in Grand Forks. Very few people were at this practice. And Dion Phaneuf and Sidney Crosby got into it. I'm telling you, they got into it. And it was physical. It was nasty. It was not orchestrated. And it showed you the intensity and the competitive nature of both players. And everybody that was there was watching going, oh, man, this thing's for real. These guys are tough. Yeah. And the team responded. That's an example of getting better every day.
Okay.
And the team responded to that, and they got better every day because of that.
And so, Pierre, that's another thing I think that maybe fans wonder about too is, when you see these teams play, and that's a perfect example of it, but I also want to just expand it a bit, is how do they gel so quick? How, like, they're just coming in from all areas of their own country, from different leagues, different colleges, and then they're just thrown into this roster, and somehow, the successful ones do gel. So what's the key to that, to get the team to gel as fast as they need to?
The summer camp is critically important for all the teams. Usually it's a 5 to 7 day camp. And what happens at the camp, nobody gets an entitlement in Canada. Now, for the longest time, the American players felt entitled. And I will not tell you the person who at USA Hockey I spoke to about this, but I can tell you their National Hockey League person now. They asked me, why is Canada so successful at building what you just talked about, Jimmy, this cohesion, this chemistry? I said, because the guys know they could get cut up until the very last day of tryouts. Whereas you guys just say, we're putting Jimmy Murphy on the team. Doesn't matter if he gets no goals in the first half of the year. He's one of our guys. He's going to be on the team. So they created an entitlement program in different parts of the world. It wasn't just the Americans, by the way. The Canadians always made it a hardcore, nasty, mean-spirited event to try to make the team because they wanted their guys to have a rough underbelly. They wanted to be the sandpaper, grizzled guys. The trial process, very draconian. I will admit that now. Very, very harsh, very draconian. But you know what? If you're a proud Canadian hockey player, it matters. It helps you. And I know the media gets after Hockey Canada for that process in particular, but I can tell you from all the years I was around, even the players that got cut, they understood what the process was about, and they didn't take it. Most of them didn't take it personally. Some did, obviously. I mean, I won't tell you the players, but I've seen first-round picks get cut, at 5 o'clock in the morning and see them at the airport afterwards, and it's really tough. It's hard to digest, but that's where the Canadian program was and still is. And I know that the Americans started to get a little bit more of that. And I think that's helped their program a lot.
All right. Well, let's look at these two rosters right now. We'll start with USA Hockey.
Yeah.
Give me two players, any position, can both be the same position, Pierre, that are X factors for the success of this USA squad.
Lane Hudson, a BU product who's drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in defense. I think he can impact the tournament and should be the defenseman of the tournament. And if he's not, he either got injured or didn't have a particularly good tournament. And then the other player would be Cutter Gauthier, who's at Boston College, keeping it fair on Comm Avenue right now. He's at Boston College. He's a big center iceman, played in the World Junior last year, Philadelphia Flyer first-round pick. I think both those guys will be X-factor players for Team USA.
Okay, now Hockey Canada.
Well, I'm going way young now. So I'm just going to tell you there's one player in particular that I think will make a huge difference, and that's Macklin Celebrini. I believe Celebrini, and this is not a novel take from me, so I apologize in advance.
Right.
But he's going to be the first overall pick in the draft this summer, and he's a special player. I think he's got the potential to be a generational player, which is high praise indeed. Do I think he's as good as Connor Bedard offensively right now? No, I don't. Do I think he's got a lot of things that a lot of great players we've seen over time that have played in the tournament have done? I do. I think we do. And then you're going to laugh at this one, Jimmy, but I think Matthew Poitras could be an X-factor player for Team Canada. Canada doesn't always do this, but they did it in this case. They left a roster spot open after the selection camp,
I was going to ask
knowing that there's a chance. And, Jimmy, I don't want to say too much of patting ourselves in the back, but we talked about this 3 weeks ago. I mean,
You called it, Pierre. It's okay. That's the truth. I mean, and you called me on the phone during that Arizona game, and what's happened since then? I mean, everything we kind of predicted happened, and he's over there now, and I'm with you. He could be.
And I do think so. The NHL experience helps. The fact he wasn't logging gigantic minutes in the NHL, so he's not going in there a beaten down player. He's going in there energized and vitalized. And I would say Donnie Sweeney communicated with him based on the intel I've been getting really well. So the kid's not taking this as a demotion. He's seeing this as an opportunity to get invigorated and be ready to play the second half of the NHL season. So if he goes over there and does what most hockey people think he can do, he's going to be a huge X factor for Canada.
Yeah, and you know what I love too? I mean, I look at it, Pierre. Look, they were applying the load management, right, recently with him. Mm-hmm. He's kind of down in the dumps lately. Maybe that's a little strong, but he's not really happy, obviously. He's struggling. He's hit a wall. And I don't know. I just see okay, why have him just sit here every other game in the press box when he could be playing in that type of atmosphere? And I think he's going over there with a little chip on his shoulder. Not to say, screw you to the coach or anything over here in Boston, but just to prove, hey, I do belong. And he wants to come back with that on his resume to prove to himself and to prove to his peers, hey, look what I just did. I'm ready to go now. So I think it's a great move. And I think a lot of teams should consider that if they're ever in the same position that the Bruins were. So.
I love it. It takes me back to when Corey Perry made the 05 team. He was the last player to make that team. And he made it because of a great conversation that he had with Wayne Gretzky, who told him, hey, you're the leading goal scorer in the Ontario Hockey League. How could you not make this team? You better get out there and score. And the last pre-tournament game, I think he had 3 or 4 goals, if I remember correctly. And it made a difference. He played on a line with Sidney Crosby and Patrice Bergeron. The rest is history. That line was crazy good.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just ridiculously good. And Corey was a big part of it. And he wanted to prove people wrong. And I think PPW, proving people wrong, is something that Matthew Poitras wants to do right now. And there's no better forum to do it in than the World Junior. There's no better stage. And to be in a great hockey city like Gothenburg, and it is a phenomenal hockey city. I've been going there for so many years. And, I remember staying at the Hotel Panorama for so many years, which is up above the city. And it's a special hockey place in my heart. Players like Daniel Alfredsson. You look at all the players that have come out of Gothenburg over time. Oh, yeah. And Färjestad, not too far away. It's an amazing part of the hockey world. It really is.
Yeah, I got to get over there sometime. All right, let's get to some questions here. We've got a few coming from our listeners and viewers. Let's throw one up here. Question about the Sens. Do they need a veteran D to help them out? I feel like Giroux isn't enough.
Oh, they desperately need defense, and that's something that's been part of their, foible for a while, I guess, if you want to call it that. They've always, it's not easy not having Shabbat playing. Thomas is such a good player for them and an elite puck mover. But I think they needed to stabilize things defensively, not offensively. I mean, when you look at Jake Sanderson and you look at Jacob Trickeren and you look at Thomas Shabbat, that's a pretty good left side, Jimmy. I mean, it's a real good left side. So what you need to identify long-term is stopping power in the back end, the matchup defenseman. And Artem Zub's a good player. Is he elite shutdown guy? I don't know about that. I would say probably not. Is he a capable shutdown guy? The answer is yes, but I think they need more on the back end. And getting Shane Pinto back after the first of the year, Jimmy, I know he's not a defenseman, but as a forward, I think that helps Ottawa a lot because he does have that defensive awareness. He's a really good 200-foot player, so I think that'll help their defense.
I'm glad you brought that up, Pierre, because I read recently that he's back in the Ottawa area, starting to kind of reacclimate himself. But here's one thing. Unless I'm mistaken, he's not signed yet, is he?
No, I don't think that will be a difficult negotiation. I think that will be one.
Just saying.
No, it's fair. But he's coming out of entry level. He doesn't have a lot of numbers that are going to support a massive raise in his contract. Yeah. I would say that should not be a difficult.
Yeah, he's gonna take what he can get right now.
I think that'll be an easy negotiation.
Yeah, for sure.
For both sides.
Yep, for both sides. All right, let's go to another question. Which right to the point.
I like the handle, though.
I do too. Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I like the handle. Well, I think the Americans and Canadians are going to be right there at the top, but don't discount the home team, the Swedes. The Swedes are going to be very difficult to play against. They're obviously going to have a tremendous support group behind them with the Swedish fans. What's interesting, Jimmy, I talked to somebody who's part of the broadcast, and they said over 3,500 Canadians are going over for the tournament.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of home cooking too for Canada.
That is great.
And that was for me, of all the years I had a chance to be around the tournament, the participation of the Canadian fan base is elite. It's so superior. It's fantastic. And I'll give you one quick one. I know we got a bunch of questions, but I'll give you one quick one. The 05 World Juniors in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So a lot of people were driving down from Winnipeg. It's not that far. And there was a terrible, hellacious storm. And they closed the roads between Grand Forks and Winnipeg. So everybody had to stay over. So the University of North Dakota opened up their inside football stadium, got all these cots put on the football field floor. It got to the point where there was no more beer left. Like, the beer was gone. The city of Grand Forks was out of beer, pretty much, in 2005. And it was all those great fans that came down from Winnipeg to watch that phenomenal Team Canada who just ran roughshod over the entire tournament. But that was one of those that I will remember. There was no beer left pretty much in the city of Grand Forks.
Yeah. Well, that's like, Pierre, that's what I was telling you guys. I think when we had Bob Motzko on, and I was in Montreal, but not at the game. And it was just because it was so impossible to get tickets, right? So a lot of Americans drove up for that gold medal game, but weren't able to get in. So they flooded the bars. And it was just, you would walk into a bar in downtown Montreal and there's USA chants going out, and then it flooded into the streets. And I was like, oh boy, there's going to be some fights here. But it was pretty respectful. That's another thing too, Pierre, and I'm sure you've seen it at these tournaments. While they, hate each other, so to speak, there's always been a great mutual respect between American fans and Canadian fans. And I've always loved how they've, they'll tip their hat to the other one, to whoever wins.
I think that's really well said. I agree wholeheartedly. One of the biggest things that people that need to know about this tournament that don't know, it's a big thing in Canada because they don't have bowl games. So this is a time of year when you have bowl games. And I'm down south right now in South Carolina, and I just finished having lunch before we did this podcast, and I'm sitting in this club. I know a lot of the people there, and these two young men come in, and they have Alabama Crimson Tide sweaters on. So and they came over to say hello. They like hockey too, and we were talking, and I said, I didn't know you guys were fans of Auburn. Just busting, because that's like taboo. Auburn in Alabama. And they said, what? And they looked at me. I said, I'm only kidding. I know you guys. That's in Alabama. Hey, I get it. And but the bowl games matter so much in the United States. In Canada, the World Junior is their bowl game.
Oh, yeah. And
it's not just for one or two areas. It's for the whole country.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, when Gordon Miller and I were doing this event, there would be ratings of 4 and 5 and 6 million people for gold medal games. The NHL would love to have one number like that for a national telecast game in the United States for a regular season NHL game. They can't even get close to that.
Yeah.
That's my point. It shows you how massive the World Junior is in the country of Canada.
It's great. And I've been there a couple times now on Boxing Day in Canada. And it's nothing like, waking up, having some leftovers from the day before. You got the tree still there, and you watch hockey all day. It's a treat. It's a tradition. All right, let's go to more questions here. Do we feel that Hanifin is gone from the Flames for sure? That's a good question. I'm going to say yes. I don't know if that's my gut is it's via trade, but it could be free agency as well. But I'm going to say yes, Pierre.
I'm going to say yes as well. The reason being, there's two different roads this can take. The trade route, Calgary will realize at some point, yes, they're a legitimate playoff contender, or no, they're not. But if you look at what's happened here in the last couple of years, Johnny Gaudreau leaves for nothing. That's a problem. And then obviously the Tkachuk trade has not worked out for Calgary as much, even though Uyghur's done some good things. Huberdeau has not. And so they've had, a stall kind of in their development phase. And so I would say at some point, if they realize they can't get Noah Hanifin signed, they're going to have to move him. They cannot lose him for nothing. And being an American kid from Boston, Jimmy, who went to your alma mater, I can't think that staying in Calgary, if he has a chance to be a free agent, unrestricted, that he's going to go back there. I think he'll look somewhere else.
I'm with you. He's coming east for sure. And by the way, I see he's leaving our chat room now. We appreciate Shane checking in. He wanted me to ask you, Pierre, did you ever get a pair of Cooperalls for Christmas?
I never got Cooper. Believe it or not, I was, obviously still playing hockey when the Cooperalls came out. I never did.
Okay.
I never did. But it's pretty cool. When I was coaching in Hartford, they were one of the first teams with Philadelphia to wear the Cooperalls. And Philadelphia did it right. They wore black pants, and it was kind of a screen for the goalie. People forget that.
Oh, wow.
It kind of caused some problems for the goalies of the opposition. In Hartford is a little bit different, but I saw them when I went through our old equipment stashes. I saw some of the Cooperalls when I was going through, and our equipment guy at the time was Keith Parker, and I remember talking to Parky about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we got some left in the back room," and I went and looked at them, so I thought that was neat.
The Hurricanes are doing a retro night where they're going to wear those this year.
Oh, that's cool. I think that's great.
They already brought back the Whalers jersey. Now they're going to do the Cooperalls as well.
You know what? One of the things I really want to commend them for in Carolina, they've paid a lot of homage and respect, not only to the organization, but to the great fans in the city of Hartford. A lot of that city really did a good job for a long period of time supporting that team. And the problem really happened was that the insurance industry left the city of Hartford. And when that happened, that was it. I mean, it had nothing to do with hockey. It had to do with hardcore economic values that were going on at the time in the city. And so it was really tough. I know part of why I left Pittsburgh to go there was Brian Burke. I had so much appreciation and respect for Brian. But the other one was I had watched all those great Hartford-Montreal playoff series, and I had watched all those great Hartford-Boston games over the years. And I said, these fans are electrifying. I want to go there. If I'm going to leave Pittsburgh, which was awesome, I shouldn't, looking back at it now, I probably should have stayed in Pittsburgh. But you think about it and you're like, whoa, at the time you kind of got it. And then you get there and all of a sudden the insurance industry divorces the city of Hartford, and it just became a problem.
Well, and it's great that you point, I mean, look, if you want to question the hockey love in that state in Connecticut, I mean, look at how many professional players have come out of Connecticut in the last 15 years or so. Well, who do you think their parents were cheering on? Who do you think their parents grew up watching? They grew up watching the Whalers, most of them my age now. And that had an influence on hockey down through the generation.
We don't rehearse this show ever. And just to build off Jimmy's point, you think about the great Brian Leach, you think about Max Pacioretty, you think about Cam Atkinson. I mean, I can go down the line just without any notes here in front of me. Jonathan Quick. All these great players from the state of Connecticut, they were either part of Mid-Fairfield, which is still an elite program, or other programs in the state of Connecticut. They go to prep schools like Avon Old Farms. They go to Taft and play for Ryan Shannon. I can go down all these different routes that these young players have a chance to play. They can go to the Brunswick School now. You think about the Drury brothers, that were a Fairfield prep. So it just, again, it's a laundry list of really good players, Jimmy, to your point, and Connecticut's done a magnificent job developing players, but most of those families started watching Hartford Whaler hockey. They weren't so much watching the Rangers. They were watching Hartford Whaler hockey.
Exactly. All right, let's go to our next question. Interesting. I don't know what to think of that, Pierre.
Well, I have a lot to say about that. First of all, I'm a big fan of Patrick's. It wasn't that long ago that I watched him give a phenomenally eloquent speech at a Hockey Hall of Fame event for the late Pierre Lacroix, who was his agent. And it was really heartfelt and emotional and was really well done. I will tell you this. When Patrick became the coach of Colorado, Jimmy, I remember they were playing in Pittsburgh, and I always get to the rink super early, whether it's 7:30 or 7:45 in the morning. I'm always there. And I just like to sit there, have a coffee, think about the game. And I was the same way when I was coaching. When I was coaching, I was obviously more hands-on, breaking down tape and doing things like that. But when I was broadcasting games, I'd always get there early. And I was there to do a Colorado-Pittsburgh game, Patrick's first year in Colorado. And I hear this noise down the hallway. And I'm like, that's interesting. And it's by the visitors' room. So I walked down there, got a cup of coffee in my hand. There's only one guy there. It's Patrick Roy. And he's breaking down tape by himself. He's a hockey addict. He's a hockey addict.
That's awesome.
And he wants to win badly. And he has done that, obviously, in the Quebec Major Junior League. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a chance. But when you hire Patrick, you also hire a high-profile person.
Yep.
And if you're a GM that's got a lot of comfort in its own standing, you're not afraid of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of GMs are afraid of that, Jimmy.
And by the way, I want to apologize to those who aren't watching or listening later. I forgot to read the question, and the question was, do we think the fact that Patrick Roy is not hired yet, is that because GMs are scared of him? And so that's what Pierre was talking about there. And Pierre, look, I think we could circle back on this topic here to the team we began speaking about when we started this episode, and that's the Ottawa Senators. I don't know. I mean, to me, it makes a little sense. They're trying to instill more responsibility, more accountability, and more passion. He could be a good fit there. I don't know. I don't know the logistics behind it. I don't know who knows who in terms of GMs and the politics and all that. I'm just looking from the outside saying it could make sense to me.
Well, he's bilingual as well, and the Ottawa marketplace is a bilingual community. There's no question about it. One of the names I've heard, and I hate to speculate because now that DJ's gone, I have no problem speculating because they've already named Jacques Martin as interim head coach. So it takes me back to the Scotty Bowman line when he got hired in Pittsburgh. They said, Scotty, how's it feel to be the interim coach? He looks at the answer, or the questioner, I should say, and he says, every coach in this league is interim. One of the best lines ever. It's one of the best lines ever. And I was standing right there next to him like, oh, boy, that's pretty good. But no, one of the names I've heard is John Gruden, who's coaching the Toronto Marlies right now in the American Hockey League. He's got a relationship with Mr. Hanlauer and also with Steve Stales from his time in the Ontario Hockey League. So maybe somebody like that to grow with the team and basically create the fundamental restructuring they want to have within the group. But I think there won't be a shortage of likely candidates. And I would say this, Jimmy, we're seeing, and you made a great point off the top, these teams that have made coaching changes and how well some of the coaches have done. We've had coaches on our show already on the eye test that I think are legitimate, viable candidates to be head coaches in the NHL. Jay Pandolfo. Yep. It would be one. Greg Brown would be another one. Bob Mochko could be another one. Greg Carvel, I can tell you right now, should be a legitimate candidate for any coaching job that comes up. Yep. I have no disrespect for Chris Knobloch. I told you when they hired him, it was a great hire. Yep. But I'm telling you right now, all these, John Hines, same, he's a good friend of mine. All these guys are great coaches, but I just named 4 guys that have never even had a sniff. There's more. I'm so tired of people saying, well, there are too many teams and not enough good coaches. That's a bunch of malarkey. No, it's not true. Yeah. It's not true.
Yeah. And I think that's here. And look, I mean, no disrespect to any of the GMs in the NHL over the last few years, but I'm sorry. Like, I'm with you right now. Stop recycling. I mean, no disrespect to the coaches, but like, start giving new guys chances. Start expanding your horizons when it comes to looking for coaches. Don't keep going to the well or go to, well, this guy knows a friend of mine, and, this is a good connection, and, they got 3 degrees of separation. No, go outside the box. Try it. I think you'll be rewarded in the end, and the league will be better for it.
Oh, I agree. But there's one name out there that if I were an owner, I would want to talk to him as long as he has league approval, and that's Joel Quenneville.
Yeah.
I'm shocked right now as we sit here and talk. Mm-hmm. His name is never brought up.
Well, I think it's being brought up here. I just think publicly people are afraid to bring it up.
They should. I mean? Yeah, I do know what you mean. I do know what you mean, but I think we're past that point now.
I do too.
And all I would say is he is, unless you bring Hitchcock back, he's the best coach out there that can coach a team to win a Stanley Cup. Yeah. He can. He just can't.
I'm with you. Yeah, and it's interesting to see like what's going to happen. I mean, we keep hearing he's going to be reinstated, when it will happen, but he probably, if he was reinstated, he'd be coaching right now for sure. He would have gotten a job, I think, with all the jobs that have opened up. A few more might be opening up. I don't want to sidetrack, but quickly, Buffalo. All right, I got to get this off my chest, Pierre, and I mentioned this on Twitter, and I mean no disrespect to fans. You have every right, when you pay the money you're paying to go to a hockey game, to boo, to say whatever you want within the boundaries of class and respect. But read the room, Buffalo, chanting fire Donnie, fire Donnie, fire Donnie all through the game. I get it. This team, I don't disagree. They probably do need a change. But in case you've been in a cave, he's kind of going through a tough time right now. I think there's a time and a place for that. Read the room. It's not all his fault. And I think Buffalo fans are better than what they showed last night. And sorry, I had to get that off my chest.
No, you're allowed. Just like those fans are allowed to boo, you're allowed to have an opinion too. I think that's strong. It's a good take. It's a fair take. I'm just trying to say this in a polite way. Buffalo fans are frustrated. They're frustrated for
they have every right to be,
and they have a lot of right to be frustrated. There's issues in terms of how the team has been constructed. I think they're figuring that out. It might be a little too late. But I would say this is that it's a very viable hockey market. I always had the utmost respect when they played in the Odd and I was coaching, or when I was broadcasting in the new arena. The passion base for the fans. Buffalo, New York is a fantastic hockey community. It is. It really is. But this is not on Donnie Granato. You can say it's just like DJ. It wasn't on DJ in Ottawa. I'm just telling you. We saw a new coach go in last night, and it was the same result. It's not – it is what it is. There are flaws in how the team has been constructed there, and there are flaws in how the team has been constructed in Buffalo. Yeah. Eventually, it'll get worked out. It will. Yeah. But I've walked in the shoes of those coaches, and when there are flaws, it's hard to overcome. At the National Hockey League, you might be able to coach your way out of a college game. You might be able to coach your way out of a major junior game. You might be able to coach your way out of, an American Hockey League game. But usually, talent takes over at the NHL level. There's just not enough of it right now in Buffalo. There's just not enough of it.
Yeah, and I want to say, too, and like I said, I have all the respect. If there's a city in the United States or in pro sports in general right now that I want to see win a championship, it's that city, whether it's the Bills or the Sabres, because I know they're diehard loyal fans up there, and they've gone through hell and back. And I think it would be the coolest and most exciting and most fun parade if one of those teams ever wins. So I want them to win. I just say, just be aware. That's all. Be a little more aware of what's going on. But we got some more questions here.
Well, before you get there, I just want to give one shout out to the city of Buffalo. One of the major reasons why I want you to win, it's not buffalo wings. I can have those anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
They're great. They're great, especially at Gabriel's Gate there. Trust me, I go there a lot. Little shout out to Gabriel's Gate. Great place in Buffalo. But it's about chefs. There's no better place in the National Hockey League to have a dinner than chefs. So everybody in the league wants to go to chefs. So they want Buffalo to do well. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go. I'm with you. Maybe they'll bring the cup in there when they win it finally.
Oh, they'd bring the cup there for sure.
Here we go. Let's get to some more questions here. Great podcast. Where do you see the future of the Columbus Blue Jackets going? As much as I am down in this season, I look at the talent and I'm very encouraged. Do you feel as optimistic? Pierre, I think I know what your answer is.
Yeah, I do actually. And I'm very excited for them long term. The defense is starting to really come around. Up front, they've got tremendous stuff going on right now, and they've got some chips in the game to kind of accelerate the rebuild. I think Kent Johnson is an example of where they could go. His talent level's off the charts. I was a big Fantilli fan going into the draft. I'm a big Adam Fantilli fan now. Had another good game last night against the Buffalo Sabres. I think he's got a chance to be like Mike Modano, and that is a heck of a player. So I think the future there is extremely bright. It's just going to require a little bit more patience.
I'm with you too. And one thing I see, and I'm sure this Columbus Blue Jackets fan can relate. The fans are frustrated, Pierre, that they're not giving those kids more of a chance, that they're getting buried down the lineup, maybe in the bottom six instead of the top six. And then even Kent Johnson being in the AHL for a bit there. What's your take on the approach the coaching staff has taken so far there? And do you think they're doing the right part in the development right now?
You know what I like about their coaching staff? It's no nonsense. So you've got a guy on their staff that knows how to win. He won 3 different Stanley Cups in 3 different cities with 3 different organizations. I'm talking about Mark Recchi. He won in Pittsburgh. He won in Boston. He won in Carolina. He was a critical component for all 3 of those teams. And
Yes.
I've had the privilege of working with him over time. He's been a member of an Olympic team. I can tell you right now, they're instituting organizational standards there that are about winning. I've known Pascal Vincent since he was a coach in the Quebec Major Junior League. When I was living in Montreal and he was running the Montreal Juniors, I used to go and work at their practices just to give back to the game. And I'm a big fan of him. And he spent a lot of time in the American League. He knows how to coach. I think they're actually doing a good job as a staff. Again, they don't have a lot of artillery right now. They've got guys that are hurt. They've got guys that are important that matter a lot that have been injured. Boone Jenner's one of them. Jack Roslovic is another one of them. They didn't have Werenski for a while. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but I think the future for that team is actually pretty bright.
Yeah, and I'm with you too. I like what you talk about the organizational standards because I think that's huge, right? And we talked about it off the top of the show with Ottawa and resetting that. They're not getting to the point where maybe they got to reset. They're setting it now, Pierre, and it's gonna hurt a bit, so to speak. It's gonna sting some of these guys early on, but in the end, they're gonna feel way more. They're gonna feel happier that they learned these hard lessons early on and be able to apply it later. So I think they're on the right track there too. And look, they've got some guys too, Pierre. You talked about accelerating the rebuild. They can even add to this rebuild by trading some veterans on that team at the deadline as well and stockpiling some picks and prospects.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm saying they've got some runway to play with here that a lot of teams don't have. And that's because they do have players like Fantilli, players like Johnson, players like Werenski that can really step up and be star players in the league. There's not a lot of teams that have that many young players that could be everyday stars in the league.
All right, let's go to another question here. Do you guys see Daniel Alfredsson becoming the head coach similarly to Marty St. Louis and the Habs? Is they give a guy with minimal experience the reins?
I would be surprised if Daniel became the head coach. We'll see. But, again, it's one thing to want to do it.
I was just going to say, I don't know if he wants it.
It's another thing to have to live through it every day. Yeah. And I know one thing. He's a real proud man. He's very proud to say that he lives in Ottawa. He never left. It's an easy community to love. I've lived there before 2 different times, actually. It's a magnificent city. It really is. Probably one of the most underrated places in North America to raise a family. And so I can see why Daniel was proud to say he's from there. But to be the head coach of an NHL team is a different deal. And I just don't know if he really wants to do that. I haven't talked to him about it, to be honest with you.
Okay. And I just get the vibe from afar that he wants to come in and help right now and just guide them through this storm. And then we'll see where we're at. So that's kind of the feeling I get from afar. But
I always saw him being more of an upper management person rather than a coach on the ice. That's kind of where I saw him being.
For sure. All right. What's our next question here? Where do you see Detroit in their progress? I love Stevie, but I'm concerned about the lack of dynamic forwards in the pipeline. Should the lack of a super high-end forward prospects concern Red Wings fans?
No, because a lot of them are already there.
Yeah.
And so that's really encouraging. Number one, I know getting DeBrusk, he's still a real young guy. That's going to help them long-term. Lucas Raymond is a tremendous young forward. Carter Mazur is a kid that's playing down in Grand Rapids right now. I've watched him play ever since he was a young guy and went to the University of Denver and watched him win a national championship there. He's a really talented kid. They've got more than enough talent, I think, Jimmy, coming through the pipeline. A lot of it centers around Dylan Larkin, obviously, and keeping him healthy. He makes such a difference for that team when he's healthy. But, the addition of Kopp, the addition of Comfer, you look at some of the players that Stevie's added, I think has been great. And I think eventually when Simon Edvinsson comes up and plays on their defense, he's going to be really good. Jimmy, I know I've talked to you about him for a long period of time. I don't want to bore you, but
no, you're not boring me.
I'm excited. A really, really special player in that.
And let's not forget, as we agree, one of the most underrated young players in the league, in Moritz Seider. And Mo Seider, I mean, this guy is something, So out of all the teams that, we've discussed these teams on the fringe that maybe you're taking a leap ahead. I think Detroit has taken a leap and it's full speed ahead. So I wouldn't be worried about them. Let's get to our next question. Will the goalies fly earlier than forwards and defensemen on the trade market?
Okay, so I'll give you an example.
Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Edmonton Oilers need a goalie. They can pretend and play word games all they want. If they are serious about getting back into the race, they have more than enough firepower. They have more than enough skating ability in the back end. They have more than enough good coaching. What's the one thing they don't have enough of? They don't have elite goaltending. So there's one team right away that has to do something if they are really serious about taking the next step. And they're going to be other Colorado, Jimmy, they're going to have to do something. Carolina, unless they get Freddie Anderson back and he's 100%, they're going to have to get a goalie. So I think the goalie market will probably be the first one to be established. I believe that.
And I'm feeling like mid to late January into February. I think, you said it last week, Pierre. I think this market is going to activate a lot sooner than maybe we're used to, just because of these situations where you have preseason Stanley Cup favorites that are looking in from the outside right now. So I think that's going to accelerate things for sure. Let's get to our next question. Jim, who will be the next coach fired, or will there be one? And I want to remind everyone, thank you. That's Randy Workman asking us that question. I want to remind everyone, hit the like button if you can and hit subscribe. We really appreciate it. My opinion, the next coach fired, and I know I was saying be aware of a situation right now, but if I had to pick one, sadly, I think it might be Granato in Buffalo that pays the price. I don't think it's right, but you asked the question. That's what I think might happen.
I'm going to play Switzerland here and stay in the middle and say I have no opinion on this because I've been let go as a coach and I know the pain that it causes, not just for yourself, but for your family.
Families, yeah.
And especially at this time of the year with Christmas coming around and the holiday season, I don't wish there are a lot of coaches that I don't like personally. I just don't like them. And they probably don't like me either. That's fine. I get it. I totally get it. But I would never wish a firing on anybody. And until you've walked in their shoes and understand what it's like, you would know what I mean. And it's painful. And it's more painful for the family members than it is for probably the coach. And so I won't even touch that one. With all due respect, I just can't.
No problem. Well said. Well said. All right, let's go to our next question. We got time for a few more. If Pittsburgh misses the playoffs this year, what do you think the plan of action is for them this summer or even the 2024 trade deadline?
This is a very good question.
Yeah.
Because
might be the question of the year.
Yeah, Kyle Dubas spent a lot of collateral this summer to go out and get Erik Karlsson, and he spent a lot of money going out and getting Lars Eller and getting Noel Acciari and trying to justify how they were going to make their bottom six better, because that was the big knock. They weren't getting offense from their bottom six in Pittsburgh. So it's a very good question, and it's a burning question around the National Hockey League. I think that if they were to lose on the 23rd of December to the Ottawa Senators in Ottawa, I think you're going to see Pittsburgh go into shopping mode. Not making the playoffs this year is a non-starter for the ownership there. I believe that. That's not why they hired Kyle Dubas. That's not why they gave Mike Sullivan a 5-year extension. It's all about them making the playoffs now.
Well, they went all in for Sid and Malkin. I mean, they made that clear.
And Letang.
Yeah, and Letang. So, I mean, they made that clear. And I think they know. I think Dubas wasn't brought in necessarily just to go all in. He's brought in for eventually they are going to have to just blow it up. They know that. But this year was supposed to be, all right, let's give him one final, I don't know, swan song's a strong word, but, one final shot. Let's really push for it. Give these guys what they deserve for everything they've done for the organization. So they're not going to just stand down right now. They're going to keep pushing. And I guess, Pierre, my question to you is, how do you walk that line? I just said eventually a rebuild's coming. You keep pushing. How do you walk that line without cleaning the covers too much of prospects and picks?
It's hard. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to move a higher profile person that maybe doesn't want to be moved. And, I don't want to, I hate me, I hate to speculate, but, what do you do with Jake Gensel? What do you do with Brian Rust? Does Jeff Carter have any value at the trade deadline as an older player? What's his no move situation? What's his no trade situation? So that, again, it's not an easy one. What do you think of Drew O'Connor long-term in your organization? It's a tough one. So the collateral was spent this summer. You and I talked about this a long time ago.
Yep.
The Erik Karlsson thing was a statement move by the new general manager. And if it doesn't work, we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right, I think we got time for one more. We're going to have to wrap it up here. What do we got? what is really going on with Xhekaj in Montreal?
Nothing bad. He's just going through the development process. And,
Yeah,
the biggest thing is Jaden Strubal's come up, as Kent Hughes told us on the eye test, Jimmy,
that's
where
right.
you got it out of him. I thought he did a great job. But Jaden Strubal's made a big difference there.
Yeah,
And they like him.
yeah.
And he might be a more refined player than Arber. I don't think he fights as well as Arber. But as a player, he might be a better puck mover, and he may be more stable defensively. That's all. But there's nothing wrong with Arber going down in the American Hockey League and still doing his chores. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think Pierre, I know and you've preached this many times, but just for fans out there, guys, it's not, and the players know this too. It's not an insult when they send a young guy down like that. I mean, there was a day, it wasn't always this way where these young kids were just skyrocketing right into the NHL at 19, 20, 21 years old. They would season in the AHL. That the AHL is a great developmental league, and it's not an insult when you send a player there. You're just trying to help them season and be ready for the pro level and the rigors of the NHL. So I think it's fine that they did that. And a lot of the big thing, Pierre, and I think we touched on this before too, where a lot of fans were upset that Montreal had reportedly told him to kind of back off the fighting when he's in the AHL. Why would he want to fight some guy who's just trying to make a name for himself and could injure him? He doesn't have anything to prove to them. Just go down there, develop, and come back and be a refined player, and he'll be fine. I think he's on the right path. Don't worry.
The fighting part of the game, he doesn't need practice at. He knows how to do that. So that's what got him a contract. He needs to work out some of the other things, and I believe the Canadians will do that with whether he likes it or not down in Laval. It's just the reality of the business.
For sure. All right, one more question here we said from Sammy sending us it right now. All right, Fishing, another great question from him. How has Noah Dobson earned an early Norris Trophy nomination? Is he now ahead of Pulock in the D-Corps in Long Island?
You know what? They've had injuries, so those injuries, whether it's to Pulock or whether it's to Adam Pelech, has opened up an amazing opportunity for Noah Dobson. And Noah, right from the start of the year, I talked to somebody who's a director of player personnel for an NHL team, and after about the first week, the Islanders didn't look like they were going to be super good. They've obviously started to reel in a little bit, and Noah Dobson's been a big part of it, just like the goaltending's been part of it, just like Brock Nelson's been a big part of it. But Noah Dobson right now, the knock on him going into the year, really good power play guy, really good shooter, really good puck mover, not a great defender. I can tell you right now, you can't say that about that player anymore. No. Way more reliable defensively, way smarter between the hash marks and the icing line in his own zone, way better clearing the crease, far more responsible, taking away time and space in the neutral zone. Noah Dobson's becoming the player that the New York Islanders thought he was when he drafted him. He's really, I think, should be in the Norris Trophy discussion. Absolutely.
Great point there. Great point. Great question. And listen, we know there's more questions there. We apologize for not getting them, but we appreciate you joining in and asking them. And remember, hit that YouTube subscribe and hit the like button if you're watching here on YouTube. We appreciate it. Pierre, listen, it's our last time talking on air before Christmas. So I want to wish you and yours a Merry Christmas, and the same to everyone out there, same to our production crew at the Sick Podcast Network. Always a fun time. And Pierre, I'm sure we'll be talking plenty, though, off the air, and we'll be back on a week from today, and the World Juniors will have started. So we'll have some World Junior games to discuss and plenty more. As we said earlier, there's some crucial games coming up for a lot of teams across the NHL. So there'll be plenty to break down and look ahead to. Happy holidays to all. This is Jimmy Murphy. He's Pierre McGuire. We're the Eye Test. We'll talk to you next week.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.